basically, this is a romantic melodrama. In fact, most of your movies are Kronos,
Yes.
Pan's Labyrinth.
Well, I'm Mexican. Melodrama is never far away. But the fact is, gothic romance, which is what this movie is, in spite of it being sold as horror, uh, much to my many vociferations, I think gothic romance connected with me at a very early age. I read about when I was about 7 years old, 6, 7 years old, maybe even younger. I read at the same time, in the same sort of week, Jane Eyre and Frankenstein. And both of them struck me as incredible emotional autobiographies, and that's what Jane Eyre is subtitled, and I thought I developed at a very early age a huge crush for the Brontes and Mary Shelley, huge, like a groupie. They were like it was like a girl band for me. I followed them and I read everything I could about their lives, whatever is available. And I have, since I was a child, I've had an enormous sense of tragedy and an enormous sense of, you remember in radio days, Woody Allen goes to the psychologist and the mother says, he says the universe is expanding. I was like that with mortality.
Really?
Since I've dealt with that issue since I was very, very young. I saw my first body at age 5 or 4.
Did they convict you?
No, it was a traffic accident, but it really, when I see flashbacks in movies, they actually happen. I mean, when I was a kid, I kept flashing back to that image of that accident, and I didn't understand death, and then I understood it, and I found in Frankenstein, Jane Eyre, and much later, as you know, I'm a bibliophile and a collector and avid reader. I found the basic principles of Gothic, which were a counter movement to the age of reason, embracing emotion and romance. And it's the first time in any artistic movement in the history of mankind where love and death come together. And I felt that's my vibe. I connected at a very young age with that. And I think there's a poetic thing on a sense of loss. And I never celebrate winners. I never go with winning teams. I try to go for, even in a thing as big and loud as Pacific Rim, I want to see oxidized robots. I want to see people losing the battle. That's what, so, yes, but I'm a lot of fun in a long ride. I'm like that in my movies. I'm not gonna go, we're gonna die, Elvis. We could go on a long drive on
You can drive ahead. I'll just catch up with you.
I'll see you over there.
But that sense of just complete tragedy and that idea that, for you, the question I've always wanted to ask you is how do you choose when to start a movie? Because there's so much history involved in these stories. I mean, they could start at almost any point. And I always wondered, for example, how did you choose to start this movie with
the girl?
Yeah.
Well, I think I'm in the spectrum somehow, because I always think on movies in terms of colors and movement and music. And I wanted to make the movie almost symphonic in a painterly way, which I don't know if the synesthesia makes sense. But the idea was to open in white and end in white, and open with a black ghost and end with a black ghost, and then sort of color-coded and make the camera and all the visual work. And I started to feel that in terms of images and so forth. But the main thing was to recuperate the feminine spirit that fueled the Gothic romance that I read. And that brings a burden, a huge burden, where you lose a normal audience because you take away the fact that the ghosts are not going to be the villains. You take any Judeo-Christian sense of good and evil, which is the easiest way to scare people. When you say these are evil entities, you immediately have a weight. This woman killed the 7 children with an axe. She appears normally dressed with an axe, you're scared. But I wanted the ghost the horror to be human, in the same way that the love of the movie is human.
Sure.
And then deconstruct everything while using a very, very traditional structure, because Gothic romance, Jane Eyre begets Rebecca. Rebecca begets I Walk with a Zombie. Even The Secret Garden has the same. And it's a journey that is very similar to fairy tales. You use a very, very traditional structure or plot to have a shorthand with an audience. And you say, look, that's not important. The important thing is that in Gothic romance, the idea of it had degenerated into this paperback idea at the airport of Fabio with a girl running away from a burning mansion without a shirt, because Fabio never found his shirt. And I
You
wanted
just solved the mystery for me. Thank you.
I wanted to revert that and have the girl rescue Fabio in this one. And I started playing with the things that I wanted to twist. So visually, I start in the sort of colors and movement. And in the story, I say, how can I screw? How can I make? It's like I always say, I've spent my 20 years of filmmaking doing this is not a pipe. But it has to be a pipe for you to say this is not a pipe. So I use very, very, very linear plot to tell a good story, because I think the difference between a complex plot and a good story is something that I really pursue. I think characters is a story, moments is a story, especially on film, and I think in that way.
Well, I guess as we're talking about this, I find myself thinking too, and it's really evident here. And I think it's in Pan's Labyrinth. It goes back to Kronos, that idea of rooms within rooms. Just that these rooms that never end. At some point, I find myself wondering if these places really exist, or if these are like rooms inside the hero or the heroine's psyche. You know what I mean?
Well, this is an important difference, because this is Gothic romance and not horror. In horror, if you were in a haunted house movie, normally the haunted house has a sentient moral quality. Like if you talk about the Haunting of Hill House, the house is deranged. The house is alone. The house is evil. You think of The Shining and the precept of Stephen King that says evil places attract evil people. So the place is evil. Whereas in Gothic romance, the building is an extension and a representation of the psyche of the characters. And therefore, production design, wardrobe, colors are in themselves an extension of that storytelling. In The Fall of the House of Usher, the house is an extension of the incestuous, sick relationship of Usher and his sister. And I wanted to capture that. I wanted to make it coruscated, and I knew that Gothic romance, the way I understand it, which is Robert Stevenson's Jane Eyre, before Orson Welles shows up with the horse, I love this idea that you need to also create a visual melodrama, because your actors are going to talk in monologues about rubbing liniment on scars, and you need to be supporting them with a heightened visual sense and so forth.